Okay, great. Okay. Again, a lot of opportunities there. There's a lot of money that the federal government is putting out towards small business. And what also some of those numbers look like pretty large business to me. So yeah, I think it's an important for everybody that is in business to know these opportunities, investigate them, and see if they can help you be a successful entrepreneur. Now, next, one of my favorite people. We got to know each other quite well during the pandemic when we were doing a lot of work together on this same program, discussing issues in particular with our restaurants and nightlife industries and everything that was so badly affected by the pandemic. This is always very important to me as my regular job, as I am a musician. So again, I was directly affected myself. Andrew Rigie from the New York City Hospitality Alliance. He's very well-known guy. You can see him all the time on TV. He does speak so well for our industry, the hospitality and nightlife industry, and I'm so happy that he can join us. He's going to make a presentation as to what he does and how he can help anybody within that business. Astoria, that's very important. We're known for our restaurants, and I'm sure he'll have a lot of great insights. Andrew?
Thank you, Richard. Good to see you. Thanks for the kind words. Hello, everyone. Good to be here. So as Richard said, my name is Andrew Rigie. I am the Executive Director of the New York City Hospitality Alliance. We are a nonprofit that represents restaurants, bars, and nightclubs across the 5 boroughs. Think of us basically like a chamber of commerce, but focused specifically on serving and advocating for restaurants, bars, nightclubs, and the overall hospitality industry. I love Astoria. It's my old neighborhood. I was just there recently, had great dinner, great food, got a great, so much great stuff in the neighborhood. So I'm going to touch on a few different topics. I know some of the topics may have already been discussed briefly, but I'm going to give it to you from our perspective, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. So I think you got a presentation earlier about outdoor dining. Just to put everything in perspective, before the pandemic, there were about 1,100 sidewalk cafes across the 5 boroughs. The vast majority of those were located south of 96th Street in Manhattan. Probably the vast majority of those were located, south of, 59th Street or so. But when we launched the open restaurants program during the pandemic, it increased to almost 13,000 restaurants that had roadway dining and or a sidewalk cafe throughout the pandemic. It saved 100,000 jobs and really gave people the ability to get together and socialize after they had to be socially distant. It saved businesses, and I think it brought a vibrancy and a strength back to the city. But now it's been going on for a long time, and politics are tough, and we advocate on behalf of the restaurant industry. So getting to where we are today, which essentially means transitioning from a temporary emergency outdoor dining program into a more standardized, sustainable outdoor dining program that can be successful for many years, had a lot of challenges and complexities to it, because we knew we wanted something that was much more inclusive, much more better than the sidewalk cafe law that we had pre-pandemic. Like I said, most of it was, Manhattan, which is fine. That's great, but it should be distributed across the city. And even restaurants like in Astoria or other neighborhoods in Queens that could have a sidewalk cafe, often there was too much red tape, too much bureaucracy, and the fees were just cost prohibitive, particularly for small businesses to have outdoor dining. So trying to get a program that was better than what we had before, but that basically took the good stuff from the temporary emergency program and gets rid of the bad stuff and creates a more standardized program. And several months ago, the city council passed a permanent outdoor dining law. The mayor signed it into law, and it is much better than what we ever had. The fees to participate are significantly lower. Restaurants that were, priced out of it or didn't want to go through the headaches of the permitting licensing process. Some of that has changed. So not only will it cost less money to get outdoor dining, you'll also have a more streamlined permitting and licensing process. And one of the huge victories is thousands of restaurants that were just restricted due to zoning from ever having a sidewalk cafe will now be able to have outdoor dining under the permanent outdoor dining program. So there's a lot of pros. Depending on which side you're on, there's a lot of restaurateurs that were frustrated that although sidewalk cafes will be year round, roadway dining will only be 8 months out of the year. So you have to set your stuff up, you'll have to remove it, find a place to store it, and then bring it and set it back up in the coming spring season. So that's something that is being sought out now. As Yating may have mentioned earlier, the city, after they pass the law, have to do what they call rulemaking. So the Department of Transportation, which is the agency responsible for overseeing outdoor dining, proposes these rules. There is a hearing on Monday. We are submitting very detailed technical comments, and that'll answer a lot of the outstanding questions many restaurateurs and other just New Yorkers have about what the future of outdoor dining is going to look like. The rules will deal with some technical stuff about the implementation, but it'll also deal with the design standards. What can a roadway dining structure look like? What kind of material has to be used? What happens when there's two restaurants right next to each other and they both have outdoor dining? Well, they have to have, distance between them. How are they going to be accessible? The allowance for lighting or heating units in them. All of this stuff is dealt with in the rules. Richard, when we submit them next week at this public hearing, I'm happy to share a copy with you and you can distribute it to your email list. People may find it interesting. But I won't bore everyone with the real technical aspects. But what we hope is going to happen is they're going to incorporate many of our comments. I do have to give credit to the Department of Transportation and the city as a whole Yating. They put a lot of thought, careful thought, into developing these proposed rules. There's obviously some things that need to be worked out that we are advocating for, but we're hoping we're going to be able to transition over the next year to a much better outdoor dining program than we ever had before the pandemic that allows restaurants to have outdoor dining, creating jobs, generating tax revenue, activating the streetscape, but doing it in a more organized way, getting a lot of that crap that's out there down, ensuring everything that's out there is beautiful, it's being used, and it's a real asset to the city. So we're really excited. There's still some of this technical stuff that needs to get worked out, but we seem to be on a good path. And, over the coming weeks or months, we'll have all the details, and then we'll be working with restaurants to apply for the permanent program and transition into it in 2024. So that's my brief update on outdoor dining. The next issue has to do with these bounty hunter noise violations. If you're not familiar, or fortunately you're not a restaurant or another business that has got hit with them, I'll explain quickly what it is. You have a few what we're calling bounty hunters out there that are issuing, they're not inspectors, they're civilians that are issuing thousands and thousands of violations to businesses if you can hear their music on the street. So without getting into all the technicalities of it, there's a section of the law that allows everyday civilians to go out and use a section of the code that was originally created. If you remember, on busy streets, you would have like an electronics store that would be marketing out on the street with, a microphone and speakers saying, come in, we got the best deals on, stereo equipment, the lowest prices, stuff like that. And a law was passed to basically stop that on-street marketing. And it worked to an extent, but years later, a couple of these very entrepreneurial bounty hunters have been using this section of the code. And instead of using it how it was intended, they're going around, and if they can hear a business's music from inside on the street, they're writing these violations, and they're adding up to thousands and thousands of dollars for small business owners, and it's hugely problematic. So we're working on a law that will help end this exploitation of this law and exploitation of small business owners, what we say is there should be an objective sound code, which there is. And the city of New York should go out and enforce it, which they do and they can. But we cannot have private citizens that want to make, like this one individual, I believe, over $200,000 last year, going out and issuing all of these violations. It's out of control, it's unfair, and it's hugely problematic. So we're working on a bill in the city council that'll hopefully stop these bounty hunters from exploiting the law, giving small business owners some peace of mind, and ensuring that they have an objective noise standard that they can comply with. And if they don't, the city should go out and enforce it. But the situation right now is untenable, and it's a big problem and it needs to be stopped. Another issue is about temporary liquor licenses. Right now, if anyone's going to open up a new restaurant or a bar, it can take anywhere from 7 to 10 plus months to get a liquor license. Most small businesses do not have the capital to hang on and wait that long to open up a new business. And many landlords won't wait around that long for a business to see if they're going to get their liquor license. Now, outside of New York City, around the rest of New York State, you are permitted to get what is called a temporary liquor license, which essentially is just that. It's a temporary liquor license that you're issued so you can begin serving alcohol while your full liquor license, the official one, is going through the full administrative process at the state liquor authority. New York City was discriminated against, and we weren't even eligible for temporary liquor licenses. Well, the New York City Hospitality Alliance advocated really strongly, and thankfully, a couple of years ago, we got a law passed that allowed temporary liquor licenses to be issued in the city of New York. So you could get a liquor license or a temporary one within a few months, while the official license was going through all that administrative processes. Unfortunately, there were some stipulations in the New York City temporary liquor license that were not also applied elsewhere around the state, like earlier closing hours, you can't have live music and DJs, and another one that didn't allow a temporary liquor license to be issued at a location that had not had a liquor license within the past 2 years. Now, when this was first enacted during the worst of the pandemic, it made sense because the goal was trying to fill a lot of these empty restaurants and bars that unfortunately shuttered due to the pandemic and get new businesses in there. Well, here we are, however many years later, and it's become hugely problematic because a restaurant that shut at the beginning of the pandemic and is sitting there vacant, it's been more than 2 years. So someone is not eligible for a temporary liquor license. Or new construction, a new building goes up. You could not have had a liquor license there because there wasn't a former restaurant there. So new construction, not eligible for a temporary liquor license. So a big problem. And we're trying to work on a solution. We're working with some members of the state legislature on legislation that would get rid of that 2 year, requirement and extend it. So if you wanted to open up a place, where it hadn't had a liquor license in 5 years, or 6 years, or 7 years, or a new construction, you would be eligible to get a temporary liquor license. So we're working on that. We hope in the new year, hopefully early new year, first quarter, we can get that passed and signed into law. We know a lot of businesses, this is really hurting. It's delays putting people to work, generating tax revenue, filling vacant storefronts, and also feeds into the narrative that New York City can be very unfriendly to small businesses. So we're working on getting that changed. And honestly, there's a long list of other issues, but I think those are three important issues that are front and center topic on so many people's minds: the outdoor dining, stopping these bounty hunter noise violations, and making sure that more small businesses and locations will be eligible for a temporary liquor license. And with that, I think I will conclude, but I'm happy to answer any questions about those issues or anything else that may be going on in the hospitality industry in Astoria.
Hi. Thanks a lot, Andrew. That was great, and that was very covered those bases well. I appreciate that. I do have a series of questions here that I'd like to ask. First of all, what do you know of this? And this may not affect you directly in restaurants as much as retail, but it's about the issue about having problems with patrons, stealing and being rowdy and having issues like that. There's a program that's being established in Queens. The district attorney had this merchants business improvement program. Have you heard about this?
I have.
Yes, and I just wanted to know if that helps within the hospitality or the restaurant business and what you think about it. It's to allow the NYPD to issue trespass notice and warnings to disruptive individuals. You would have to sign up for it though as a business. Is this something that's being looked upon positively by the industry?
Yeah, I truly don't know how many folks have been signed up for it and using it. I am aware of it. I think it's could be a good initiative. I'd be, interested in getting some feedback from business owners that have. I know depending what sector of the small business community you're in, there are different issues. Obviously, retail, there's been a lot of theft. There's different types of issues at restaurants and bars, but I do think, and it's not just in your neighborhood, but neighborhoods across the city, there is an unease often among small business owners, workers, and customers about criminal activity. People don't like to go into their pharmacy and see things, locked up. People want to feel comfortable when they're in a restaurant or a bar or dining outdoors that they're not going to be harassed. So I do think initiatives that will help give people peace of mind, reduce theft, keep people safe, both physically, but also, the perception of crime is something that really bothers people if they
Mhm.
don't feel comfortable. So, I would be very interested to see some of the data of how it's working so far. But I know that's front and center for small business owners. Um, you know, both crime, but I just say quality of life issues as well. And especially in restaurant and nightlife, you have people that are going out, coming and going to bars and restaurants late at night. You have workers that are leaving, they're locking up the businesses late at night, whether they're walking home or often taking public transportation. They need to be safe. So it's a real citywide issue. And
Mhm.
our industry is obviously very much, part of that. And we try to provide guidance to businesses if they reach out about specific situations. Sometimes it's mental health, sometimes it's crime, sometimes it's quality of life
Mhm.
issues. So it's complex.
Thank you. I got a message from Frank Acabasio, who's the president of the 30th Avenue Business Association. His question was, uh, now that so many outdoor sheds are not around, is there a projection with the new laws as to how many they think will be reestablished?
There's not. Good question. This is something I'm always juggling with. Over the past, I'd say, year, we've seen a lot of the roadway structures come down for various different reasons. I think there's certainly a lot more that could come down either in front of shuttered restaurants or that really just haven't been being used and they're kind of run down because they were never intended to, make it through multiple seasons over multiple years in the streetway, in the roadway. Um, so it's hard to estimate. I mean, I'm sure there'll be a lot of them, but I think most restaurants first under the permanent program are going to opt for sidewalk cafes. If they can't have a sidewalk cafe because of clearance issues, or they have enough business to justify the sidewalk and the roadway, they will go for a roadway cafe. But I think you're going to see, I don't know, you know, I don't want to give a number, but I think you'll see many fewer roadway cafes in the future. But hopefully, it's successful. People see what works, what doesn't work, and then more, do it in a thoughtful way that people can enjoy and that work within the communities that they serve.
I think you'll see more, but I also think the ones that do exist are you will see not as many as you had before, but the ones that do exist will be much more efficient, much better.
Absolutely. And that's the goal with the design standards. One of the things now is people have had them up, and they're not going to necessarily take them down until they have to take them down. But the calculation changes when you have to start paying, when you have to go through a permitting licensing process, when you go to the community board, when you have to pay for them, when you have to do the regular maintenance and remove them and put them back, it's going to change the calculation. I tell people to put it in perspective. This was birthed out of a unprecedented, crisis. And no one thought when these things first went up in June of 2020 and since then that we would have been in that situation for that long. So I think the ones that come back and have it under the permit program will be nicer, and they will be many fewer. But we shall see.
Yep. Okay. I have 3 more questions. You don't have to go over long on them if you don't have time. But one question that's come up is the cost of rents and whether commercial rent controls would make sense for the industry. What's your position on it? So,
commercial rent control, we don't have a position. We have many members with a lot of different feelings about it. Some people think it's a great idea. They think it could help particularly smaller places that can't afford the ever increasing rent to stay in business. Others think look, sometimes businesses, it's just not great, but it's just the way business works. Sometimes they close and then something better ends up coming in or filling the spot. But then there's other situations if it's not a more free market, is the landlord going to invest in the upkeep of the space? Or if they feel constrained because they're not able to collect enough rent, they're not going to be able to do the general upkeep and everything that's necessary, or they just won't care as much because they won't see it as much of a profit. Their margins will shrink, and that could ultimately hurt the tenant because you have a rundown space. Or if you're negotiating to open up a new restaurant, and sometimes they'll give TI, tenant improvements. The landlord will help build out part of the space, and that's part of the negotiation of the rent. So it's tough. No, everyone has a lot of ideas, and we're very committed to what works or what doesn't work. But I think there's a lot of supporters, a lot of opposition to it. We haven't, taken a position. But what I will say, for example, in the restaurant industry is when we talk about all the costs, you look at a P&L, a profit and loss statement, and all the expenses, rent, depending on where you are, 10% of your annual sales goes to rent, and that goes up or down a little bit depending on where you are. Many restaurants are now pushing 40% labor costs, meaning that their labor costs could be about 40% of their annual sales. So when you're looking at all of the expenses, I think things like labor, not all cases, but many cases, are a much more of an expense than rent. But unfortunately, we've seen plenty of small businesses shutter because, as it's been said, the rent is often too damn high.
Yeah. Next question that comes up a lot. Food trucks and carts and their relationship with the brick and mortar stores. What is the position of the Alliance on that particular issue?
Again, this is one of the same ones. This is a lot of these issues are neighborhood to neighborhood and sometimes just even block specific. So over the years, we've heard concerns from brick and mortars where a cart or a truck is parked directly in front of a restaurant, and they're serving the same cuisine. So, you got a taqueria in the building, and then there's a taco truck parked out front. So you could understand why that's a concern. They don't have as many costs. But listen, if it's a different type of cuisine, it may not be a problem. Maybe it brings more foot traffic. So I think that mobile food vending, whether it's a cart or a truck, is a really amazing and important segment of the food industry, of the food culture and everything. I think that it's been the third rail of politics for a long time, and there's been a real failure to comprehensively address how the streetscape should look with mobile vending. They had passed some laws to increase the number of permits. They set up an advisory board. I know not all the permits or many of them have been issued since they increased the number, but you have thousands and thousands of unlicensed vendors that either are just out there vending. Um, Certainly, the current migrant situation has increased that. You
Mhm.
have many vendors that are renting sometimes upwards of $25,000 mobile vending licenses in the underground market, which I think could be addressed and reissued to actual vendors, not some guy that's living in Spain and like, oh, I'm gonna charge this guy $25,000 for a food cart. You know, so uh, listen, there's a lot that can be done. It's not going to make everyone happy, but I think locations need to be addressed, and I think there just needs to be more comprehensive reform. But for various reasons, that really hasn't um, happened. But I do think last thing I'd say is I've worked with some of the groups like the Street Vendor Project and some other folks. And, not every situation, but sometimes if people can put in the work and go out and mediate, there is a conflict between a brick and mortar business and a mobile vendor. Some ways, times there are ways to address it. Just, cleanliness of the street, making sure the vendors cleaning up, you're making sure if they have lines, they're not all congregating right in front of and the brick and mortar business and obstructing it, or if they're selling a similar cuisine to kind of move down. Sometimes the problems can't be fixed because but other times we've been successful at addressing them.
Well, I just have one more question. I know I appreciate you spending the time. We greatly appreciate it. Looks like you got your kid running around there, though.
Yes,
I'll
she's
make,
here.
I'll make this really quick. How can the issues with city agencies, regulators, and oath, how can they be improved with the hospitality industry? Is it just
Yes. So, this administration, we work closely with the Department of Small Business Services and other agencies. One of the things we've been fighting for years and years with the city is to, cut the red tape, reduce the bureaucracy, streamline the permanent licensing process, focus on education training first, issuing violations and fines as a last resort. We've gotten a lot of really good reforms, reducing fines, allowing for warnings of cure periods for many violations before a fine is levied, already implemented. But I think it takes constant effort on the part of people in government. Just the nature of government seems to create bigger government and overreach and, bureaucracy that's complicated. So I think you need city council members and a mayor and commissioners, many of which we do have, that are dedicated to breaking through that kind of permanent bureaucracy. There's a lot of successful changes that have been made. There's still a long way to go, but I think business owners, like probably many that are tuning in now, they need to call up their city council member, their senators, their assembly members, and stay on them and tell them, you need to pass policies to change this.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's not like asking what government can do to help. Sometimes it's just like getting government to stop trying to do anything, not anything, but stop trying to do stuff. Um,
Mhm.
so
We had a presentation just before you came on too from DCP on the city of Yes and what they're trying to do with their economic
yes,
um, um, changes to improve the economic condition of the city, and that's along those lines. That's a positive thing, I think. But
yeah,
we have to read through 600 pages so to figure out what they're actually doing.
it is. And there's some good stuff in there, but this is one of the things is that, there needs to be small business owners and people who care about these issues to go to community board meetings and comment and listen to the presentations. They're going to have to testify at public hearings to show support about this. I always say, don't talk about it, be about it. Often people that have time or that are super committed to one issue can go and dominate these conversations, for better or worse. I'm not even, passing judgment, but we need people that are really directly impacted by them in so many ways to get involved with organizations like the Hospitality Alliance and make time to testify and have their voice heard, because there are a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of different interests at play here that surely are going to be trying to influence, and already are, the city of yes. And if you are not part of the process and making the positive changes, you're going to get steamrolled, or if not steamrolled, you're just going to be ignored. But there's some really good stuff in that we're working on, like dancing, eliminating many of the restrictions that go back to kind of racist policies that give the city the ability to kind of weaponize the zoning laws to go and find small businesses, shut down small businesses. So these are real important issues, both to small businesses, the economy as a whole, but also in the way that we socialize and get together. I mean, you may remember we got the cabaret law repealed,
Mhm.
which had restricted dancing. Well, really, what restricts dancing in many places now is the zoning resolution. And one of the provisions in this city of yes is to essentially get government out of regulating social dancing. It's not appropriate. That should be a protected First Amendment right that people have. There should be safety measures in place, means of egress and stuff of that nature. So if people are dancing and that type of activity requires more safety measures, well, those will all still be in effect under building codes, fire department codes. But you're a musician, and if you're playing in a little restaurant, and my wife and I want to get up and dance a little bit, in many of these businesses now, the city agency or the NYPD could come in and issue a violation, like they did
I
so
remember
many
those.
years.
I remember those days very well when the cabaret law was in effect too.
Yeah.
You know.
So that's something that's in there as well. So
Mhm.
there's not a shortage of issues.
No, as a matter of fact, as you know, I sit on the land use committee here, so I'm right now trying to interpret that particular text amendment, and it's 600 pages long. Though that's sort of the problem that we're having, is being able to figure it out. But we will work on it, and it's great advice. I hope that people in the audience go to the community board's website, see when the next land use committee meeting is, when we'll be discussing this subject, and join us and give us input. We appreciate
Yep.
that. So
Excellent.
thank you so much, Andrew, for joining us. I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks
Again,
for
one.
having me. And I didn't have a slide, but anyone can go to the New York City Hospitality Alliance's website. It's the nycalliance.org, the nycalliance.org. If you have questions, you can reach out to us through the website. Follow us on social media there. And if you have a restaurant, bar, or nightclub, we'd love for you to get involved with the organization. And thanks for all you do, Richard.
Thank you so much. And if you would, you can put that information in the private chat, and we'll get it out on the screen.
Great.
Okay. Thank you again.